My name is Kira, and my life changed forever one fateful night. It wasn't the day I was fired from my job, or the day I found out my husband had been cheating on me. No, it wasn't even the day I had to leave our dream home, the one we built together. It was the night my family decided I was a lost cause. It's funny, isn't it? How the people you trust the most can hurt you the hardest. I had been struggling for months. My marriage was falling apart. My job felt like a dead end. And to top it all off, my parents, the ones who raised me to believe in hard work, responsibility, and success, were starting to give up on me. They had always expected me to follow a path. Get a good job, get married, have kids. I did everything they told me to. But it wasn't enough. I wasn't living up to their expectations. That night, the final blow came. "You've had your chances, Kira," my dad said, his voice colder than I had ever heard it. "You've been trying to find yourself for years now. It's time to face reality. You can't keep living like this." I stood there stunned. The words felt like they were being thrown at me, heavy and unforgiving. They weren't just rejecting my choices, they were rejecting me. I didn't ask for much, just a little understanding. I had tried to explain that I was pursuing something different, something more than just climbing the corporate ladder, but they didn't see it. They didn't get it. "You're out, Kira," my mother added, her voice barely above a whisper. But it hit me like a punch. "You've been living under our roof long enough. You need to get your life together. We can't keep cleaning up your mess." The sting of those words was too much to bear. I wasn't just being told to leave. I was being told I wasn't good enough. Not for them, not for anyone. I had one suitcase. One small suitcase for everything I owned, and nothing left but the broken pieces of a life I had tried so hard to rebuild. I grabbed it without a word, walking out the door, my heart pounding in my chest. The weight of rejection threatened to crush me as I made my way to the car, my hands trembling. The world outside felt cold too. I felt like a stranger in my own life. The night was dark, the streets empty, just like the pit in my stomach. No one cared. No one understood. I was alone. As I sat in my car, staring out at the empty road ahead of me, my phone buzzed. A text from my husband, David. "I'm sorry, Kira. I know I messed up, but I'm not the one who should be walking away from this." I laughed bitterly to myself. He was sorry? Really? After everything? After everything he had done? He didn't get to apologize. Not now. Not after he betrayed me. After I found out about the affair. My heart had already broken 1,000 times before, but this final blow, this feeling of being completely discarded, was worse than anything he could ever do. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and stared at the rearview mirror. For a moment, I considered calling my sister, or even my best friend. But I couldn't. My pride wouldn't let me. The loneliness and shame were too much to bear. I couldn't admit that I had failed, that I had nothing left. I drove aimlessly for what felt like hours, my mind spiraling, wondering what the next step could possibly be. What did I have left? I had no home, no family to turn to. And the one thing I had, my career, was a dead end. I was supposed to be successful. I was supposed to be someone. But instead, I felt like a failure. When I finally parked outside a small diner, I sat there for a while, lost in thought. The rain began to fall softly against the windshield, a quiet lullaby to my broken soul. That was when I remembered the lottery ticket. I had bought it months ago on a whim. I didn't even check the numbers. It had just been another thing. Something small. Something that maybe would make me feel a little less stuck. My grandmother had always believed in luck, and maybe I just wanted to believe in something too. I pulled out the crumpled ticket from my purse and checked the numbers on the app, half expecting to see the usual "try again" message. But as I stared at the screen, my eyes went wide. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The numbers matched. The jackpot numbers. $28 million. In that moment, I felt the world stop. I sat frozen, staring at the phone screen, disbelief washing over me. I had won. I had actually won. But even then, I didn't know what to do with this new reality. How was it possible that I, who had been cast out with nothing but a suitcase, was now a millionaire? I wanted to laugh. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell my parents what had just happened. I wanted to show them that I wasn't broken. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not yet. I wiped the tears from my eyes and took a deep breath. This wasn't just luck. It was a second chance. But what would I do with it? The answer would come, but not that night. Not yet. But the universe had a funny way of showing me that sometimes losing everything was the only way to find what truly mattered. And my journey had only just begun. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache. The rain had stopped, but the weight of last night's events hung over me like a thick fog. I couldn't shake the image of my parents standing in the doorway, cold and resolute. I couldn't shake the feeling of my life, my identity, unraveling with each passing second. I glanced at my phone. The notification from the lottery app was still open, the numbers flashing like a beacon in the dark. $28 million. The thought made my heart race again. The irony of it all, being cast aside with nothing but a suitcase, and now I had more money than I'd ever dreamed of. But it felt hollow, like a hollow victory. What good was this wealth if I couldn't share it with the people who mattered most? I called the lottery commission to confirm the details. They walked me through the process slowly, explaining what I needed to do, but their words felt distant, like I was listening through a fog. The reality of what had just happened still hadn't fully settled in. When I hung up, I was left alone with my thoughts again. The life I had known was over, but what was next? What was I supposed to do now? I had no job, no home, and now I had more money than I could ever have imagined. But how was I supposed to reinvent myself after everything that had happened? I grabbed my phone again and texted Amber, my best friend from college. I need to talk. Her reply came quickly. You okay? What happened? I didn't have the words to explain everything just yet, but I typed out a quick message. I'm in a bad place right now. Can we meet? Amber had always been my anchor when everything else felt chaotic. We hadn't seen each other much in the past few months. Life had a way of pulling people in different directions. But now, I needed her more than ever. She was always the one who believed in me, even when I couldn't see my own worth. We agreed to meet at our usual spot, the small coffee shop near the park. As I sat in my car outside the shop, my hands gripped the steering wheel, my thoughts racing. I had no idea how to explain all this to Amber. How could I tell her that I'd been kicked out, that my life had shattered into pieces only to have it all come crashing back together in the form of a lottery check? Amber arrived soon after, her face lighting up when she saw me. We embraced quickly, and I couldn't help but feel a little comforted by the familiarity of her presence. What's going on? She asked, her brow furrowed with concern. You don't look like yourself. I sat down at the small table and tried to steady my breath. I don't even know where to begin, I admitted. Everything fell apart last night. My parents kicked me out. Her face softened and she leaned forward. What? Kira, I don't understand. Why? They said I was a failure, I explained, my voice shaky. That I hadn't figured my life out yet. And that they couldn't keep supporting me. Amber's face twisted with confusion. But you've been working so hard with your jewelry. You're building something. Why would they say that? I don't know, I whispered, staring down at my hands. I think they wanted me to be something I'm not. They wanted me to follow their plan for my life, and when I didn't, they gave up on me. The pain was still raw, and it hurt to say it out loud. But as I spoke the words, a part of me felt like I was finally letting go of the heavy burden I had carried for so long. Amber reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm so sorry, she said softly. But you're not alone. I've always believed in you, Kira. You know that, right? I nodded, trying to hold back the tears that were threatening to spill. I thought, I thought I was doing everything wrong, that I was just chasing some impossible dream. But then something happened last night. I, I won the lottery. Amber blinked at me, her mouth hanging open. What? Wait, hold on. You what? I won. $28 million. For a moment, the two of us just sat there, staring at each other in disbelief. I could see the shock in her eyes, but there was something else there too. Hope. For the first time in what felt like forever, a flicker of possibility sparked inside me. You're joking, Amber said slowly. This is insane. I know, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't even know what to do with it. I have all this money and my world just got turned upside down. It's like I'm stuck in some sort of dream. Amber smiled softly, but there was a sense of seriousness in her tone. You don't have to figure it all out right now, Kira. You've been through a lot. Maybe this is just the universe giving you a break. You don't have to carry all this weight anymore. I nodded slowly, trying to absorb her words. For the first time in a long time, the pressure in my chest lightened just a little. Maybe, just maybe, this could be the fresh start I so desperately needed. As we continued to talk, I began to realize something. The lottery wasn't just money. It was a symbol, a way for me to finally step into my own life, to live on my own terms. But the journey wasn't going to be easy. I would have to navigate the emotions, the relationships, and the changes that came with it all. But one thing was certain. I wasn't broken. And with this new beginning, I was going to prove to myself, and to my family, that I could be more than they ever thought I could be. I spent the next few days in a haze. My world had shifted in an instant, but I couldn't quite make sense of it. I had won millions, but that didn't erase the years of self-doubt, the rejection from my family, or the deep sadness that lingered in my chest. Every time I thought about my parents, I felt torn between anger and guilt. They had raised me to believe in the importance of stability, hard work, and following the rules, but I had broken all of those. Now, it felt like they were washing their hands of me, as if I was a failure they couldn't fix. I spent the mornings at a nearby coffee shop, reading through the fine print of the lottery claim process, and the afternoons on my couch, staring at my phone, too afraid to make the call to my parents. What would I even say to them? They had dismissed me so easily, but now I was the one with the power. I could change everything. And yet, the thought of rubbing it in their faces didn't sit right with me. This money should feel like victory, but all I felt was emptiness. Amber checked in on me every day, offering her support and encouraging me to move forward. But the more I thought about my parents' rejection, the more confused I became about what to do next. Should I confront them? Should I tell them I had won? Show them how wrong they were to doubt me? Or should I just move on with my life, completely severing ties with a family who never truly understood me? But then, something happened that forced me to make a decision. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon when I received a message that shook me to my core. It was from my mother. Kira, we need to talk. Please call us. We've been thinking about everything and we want to apologize. I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity. My heart raced as a wave of emotion hit me. Anger, confusion, even a little relief. My parents were apologizing? For everything they had said? For throwing me out? For giving up on me? It felt like too much to process all at once. I didn't know if I was ready to hear what they had to say. Part of me wanted to just ignore the message and keep moving forward with my new life. But another part of me, one that still longed for their approval, despite everything, wanted to hear them out. Maybe they had finally realized the error of their ways. I took a deep breath, my fingers hovering over the phone. Then I hit dial. The phone rang twice before my mother's voice filled the air. Kira? Is that you? I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to steady myself. Yes, it's me, I replied, my voice shaky. We're so sorry, honey, my mom said, her voice softer than I had ever heard it. "We know we've hurt you, and we can't take back what happened, but we want to make it right. We just didn't understand. We thought we were doing what was best for you." I stayed silent, listening to her words, unsure of how to respond. They sounded genuine, but how could I trust them after everything they had put me through? "We want to see you," she continued, her tone full of emotion. "Can we meet? We know we don't have the right to ask this, but we want to apologize in person." The request hung in the air, the weight of it settling deep within me. I had spent so many sleepless nights dreaming of this moment, hoping they would finally come to their senses. But now, standing on the edge of this new life, I wasn't sure if I could forgive them. I had my new future ahead of me. I had money, independence, the ability to live on my own terms. But at what cost? Could I really build the life I wanted without resolving the tension that still existed between us? I took another breath and answered, "Okay, let's meet. But I need some time before I can fully forgive you. This isn't something I can just forget." "I understand, Kira," my mom replied softly. "We'll wait for you." I ended the call, my hands shaking. A wave of exhaustion washed over me. I felt like I had been carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. And now, just when I thought I could finally breathe, I was faced with a choice I wasn't ready to make. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty. I spent most of my time reflecting on my past, trying to decide how much of it I was willing to carry forward into this new chapter. The money was a blessing, but it also felt like a double-edged sword. Would I let it define me? Would I use it to prove my worth to the people who had never believed in me? The meeting with my parents was scheduled for the following Sunday. I spent the entire day before it pacing, contemplating every possible scenario. Would they apologize enough? Would they even understand how deeply their words had affected me? And most importantly, would they still love me after everything had changed? On Sunday afternoon, I found myself standing in front of their house, my heart pounding in my chest. The house that had once been my home now felt foreign, like a place where I didn't belong anymore. But I was here, and I had to face them, face the people who had been both my greatest supporters and my harshest critics. I knocked on the door, and when it opened, I was greeted by my mother. Her eyes were red, as if she had been crying. "Kira," she whispered, pulling me into a hug. "Thank you for coming." I didn't respond immediately. I just stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of the past and the uncertainty of the future pressing in on me. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. But now I wasn't sure if it was enough. Would this apology heal the wounds they had caused? Could I ever truly move on from what they had done? I didn't have all the answers, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't the same person I had been when I left. I was stronger now. And whatever happened next, I was going to be okay. The following week was a blur. After my meeting with my parents, I felt like I had entered a new phase of my life. But the uncertainty lingered. I had allowed them back in, granted them the chance to explain themselves. But I still wasn't sure where I stood with them. How could I just forget everything they had said? How could I easily forgive them for kicking me out when I was at my most vulnerable? I spent the days following that meeting in a haze, focusing on the logistics of my newfound wealth. My phone was buzzing constantly with messages from the Lottery Commission, financial advisors, and even lawyers. Everyone wanted to talk to me about my future, about what steps I needed to take to secure my new fortune. And yet, amid all this, my mind kept drifting back to that moment when my parents apologized. It wasn't just their apology I was grappling with. It was the way they had treated me, the way they had dismissed me, believed that my dreams weren't worth supporting. But somewhere deep inside, a small part of me began to wonder, could I really move forward if I didn't let go of the past? Could I become the person I wanted to be without forgiving them? The thought terrified me. I wasn't ready to go back to the way things were, but I couldn't live in the bitterness that had consumed me either. I had to find a way to forgive. Not just them, but myself. That Friday afternoon, I sat down at my kitchen table, which had become my new sanctuary. The apartment I had rented was simple, but it felt like mine. The first time I'd truly been able to create a space for myself. It wasn't much, but it was everything I needed at that moment. I set my phone down and grabbed the pen and paper I had left scattered on the table. My business plans for the jewelry company I had always dreamed of building. The idea of building something real, something all my own, was what kept me moving forward. It was why I had spent so many sleepless nights designing jewelry, finding ways to make a living out of it. But now, I could do it without the financial strain that had once suffocated me. I had the freedom to build something beautiful, to show the world who I was. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my messages, eventually finding Amber's. "How are you doing, really?" it read. I smiled, appreciating her unwavering support. I typed back, "I'm figuring it out. It's been a lot to process, but I think I'm starting to understand what all this means. I'm not going back to what I was. I'm building something new. For me." Amber's response was immediate. "I'm so proud of you, Kira. I know this is your time." And then something unexpected happened. A message popped up on my screen. This time from my father. "Kira, we've been thinking. We want to make things right. Can we come to see you? We want to help. We understand if you need time, but we're here." I stared at the message, feeling my heart constrict in my chest. My father had always been the more rigid one, the one who believed that success came from following a clear, structured path. It had always been hard for him to let go of his expectations for me, to see my artistic side as anything more than a hobby. But now he was asking to help. He was asking for a second chance. My hands trembled as I sat there, weighing the decision. I could turn them away, continue living my life without them. I had already proven that I didn't need their approval. I had money, I had freedom, and I had the beginnings of a future that was entirely my own. But as I sat there, thinking back on all the times my father had worked tirelessly to provide for us, all the ways he had been there, even if his love was sometimes conditional, I realized something. I wasn't ready to walk away completely. Maybe it wasn't about forgiveness for them. It was about forgiveness for myself. I had spent so many years believing that I was never good enough for them, and I couldn't let that define the rest of my life. I texted back, "I'm ready to talk. Sunday, 2 p.m. The words felt heavy as I sent them, as if I were giving up a part of my independence in exchange for the possibility of healing. But I had to take this step. Not for them, but for me. To prove that I wasn't a victim of my circumstances anymore. The next few days were filled with a mix of emotions. I worked on my jewelry designs, focusing on making pieces that spoke to me. Pieces that were bold and expressive, full of color and life. It was a way of reconnecting with the part of me that my family had never truly understood. My creative spirit wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was who I was. And now I could fully embrace that. Sunday came faster than I anticipated. I hadn't decided what I would say to my parents, or if I would even be able to face them. But when the doorbell rang at exactly 2 p.m., I knew that this was a moment I couldn't walk away from. I opened the door to find both of my parents standing there. My father was holding a small box, his expression unsure but earnest. My mother's eyes were red again, her face creased with the stress of trying to make things right. "I don't know how to start, Kira," my father said, his voice quiet. "We're sorry for everything. We should have supported you. We should have listened, but we didn't know how to let go of our own fears." The weight of his words hit me harder than I expected. I had spent so many years feeling like I was the one who needed to apologize, the one who needed to change. But standing here now, it felt like I had already done the hardest part, by walking away, by choosing myself. I stepped aside and motioned for them to come in. "Let's talk," I said simply. We sat in the living room, my parents on the couch, me in the chair across from them. The awkwardness was palpable, but for the first time in years, there was an openness between us. The barriers of pride and misunderstanding seemed to melt away as we talked. Really talked. For the first time in a long time. "I don't need your approval anymore," I said quietly, my voice steady. "But I do need you to respect the path I've chosen." My father nodded slowly. "We respect it. We do. We just didn't understand." "I know," I replied, "and that's why we're here now." The conversation continued, a slow unraveling of years of hurt, regret, and healing. And by the time they left, something had shifted. We weren't the same family we had been, but maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild something new. And for the first time in years, I felt the freedom to be fully myself. It had been 2 months since I first won the lottery. 2 months of ups and downs, of transforming my life from one of doubt and insecurity to something that felt almost too good to be true. Every day felt like a new beginning, but with every new step I took, I began to understand the true cost of success. My jewelry business, Kara's Creations, was flourishing in ways I never imagined. I had hired a small team to help with the designs and packaging, and the orders were coming in faster than I could keep up with. It was exhilarating to see my creations in the hands of people who appreciated them, people who understood what I was trying to build, what I was trying to express. But with the success came pressure. The pressure to keep up, to expand, to be more than just a jewelry designer. It wasn't enough anymore to simply create beautiful pieces. I had to be a businesswoman, a brand. I had to manage a team, negotiate with suppliers, and deal with all the logistics that came with running a company. I had been warned about this, the overwhelming nature of success, but nothing could have truly prepared me for the weight of it. It was one thing to dream of making a living doing what you love. It was another thing entirely to make that dream a reality and watch it grow beyond your control. It was on one of those stressful afternoons as I sat in my new office reviewing financial statements that I received a call that I had been dreading. It was from my mother. "Kira, we need to talk," she said, her voice shaky. "It's about your father." My heart sank. I had been slowly rebuilding my relationship with them, but it wasn't easy. My father still struggled to understand the path I had chosen, and there were times when he seemed to slip back into old patterns, questioning my decisions, my business, my future. I thought we had reached a place of understanding, but the way my mother's voice trembled made me afraid that something had changed. "What happened?" I asked, trying to stay calm, but my voice betrayed the anxiety that was rising in me. "It's your father," she repeated. He's not doing well, Kira. He's been having trouble with his health, and we need to talk about what comes next." I felt a wave of panic surge through me. My father had always been the pillar of our family, the strong one. To hear her say he was struggling, physically, emotionally, brought back all the memories of the man who had once dismissed me, who had pushed me away in pursuit of his own rigid expectations. "I'm coming over," I said without thinking. I didn't know what else to say, but I couldn't sit here anymore. The weight of the conversation hung in the air like a thick fog, but there was one thing I was sure of. I had to be there for him, no matter what had happened in the past. When I arrived at their house, my mother met me at the door, her face pale, her eyes swollen from crying. "Kira, he's been getting worse," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "He won't talk to me about it, but I know something's wrong." I stepped inside, my mind racing with questions. What was going on? Why hadn't my father told me himself? Why had he been keeping this from me? I found him in his study, sitting at his desk, his back hunched over, his face drawn with exhaustion. He looked older than I remembered, vulnerable in a way I had never seen him before. He didn't look like the father I had once feared, but rather the father I had always wanted. "Dad?" I asked softly, approaching him. "Mom said you're not feeling well. What's going on?" He looked up, his eyes tired, but there was something else there. Something I hadn't expected. Regret. "Kira," he said quietly. "I don't know how to say this, but I've been pushing myself too hard. The doctor said it's my heart. It's been giving me trouble for months, and I didn't want to admit it. I didn't want you to see me like this." The words hit me like a blow to the chest. My father, the man who had always been the strong one, the one who had told me to toughen up, to keep going no matter what, was admitting that he couldn't do it anymore. And in that moment, I realized something that shook me to my core. I had spent so much time trying to prove myself to him, trying to show him that I was capable, that I was enough, that I had failed to see the man behind the walls he had built around himself. "Dad," I said, my voice breaking, "why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you let me in?" He sighed deeply, rubbing his temples. "I didn't want to burden you, Kira. You've been through so much already. You've worked so hard to build your life, and I didn't want to be the reason you felt like you had to take care of me." Tears welled up in my eyes as I walked over to him and placed my hand on his shoulder. "Dad, I'm not a little girl anymore. I don't need you to be perfect. I need you to be honest with me. We can face this together." For the first time in years, my father looked at me, not as the daughter who failed to meet his expectations, but as an equal, as someone who could support him in his time of need. Over the next few weeks, things began to shift between us. I spent more time at their house, helping with my father's health and supporting my mother in ways I hadn't expected. It wasn't easy. Old wounds were still there, raw and unhealed. But we were trying, and that's all that mattered. In many ways, it felt like a rebirth for our family. As I continued to build my jewelry business, I realized that this journey wasn't just about success or money. It was about healing, about coming to terms with the past and finding a way forward. Success, I was learning, was not just about what you achieved. It was about who you became in the process. And the more I worked to repair my relationships, to face the things I had been avoiding, the more I realized that the true wealth I had was not in my bank account, but in the people around me, the ones who had always been there, even when I hadn't been able to see it. As my business continued to thrive, I took the first step towards something I had never thought possible: a true reconciliation with my past. And with that, I found peace. The months after my father's health scare were some of the most transformative of my life. It wasn't just the growth of my business or the newfound wealth that changed things. It was the way my relationships began to shift. The walls I had built around myself to protect my heart, to shield myself from the hurt and rejection, were slowly coming down. I wasn't just rebuilding my career. I was rebuilding the trust and connection I had with my family. I had learned that true success wasn't just about creating a business or accumulating wealth. It was about learning to live authentically, to choose what was best for me, and to find peace in the process. I had fought for my dreams, but I had also fought for the chance to heal and forgive, and that made all the difference. My jewelry business was thriving. Kira's creations had expanded beyond my wildest expectations. I was now designing pieces for high-end clients, even celebrities who wanted to wear something uniquely personal. It wasn't just about creating beautiful jewelry anymore. It was about creating a brand that represented me, my story, and my journey. But success wasn't without its challenges. Managing a growing business required sacrifices. I spent long hours in my studio, refining my craft, building my team, and navigating the complexities of being a CEO. But for the first time, I felt in control. I wasn't doing it to prove anyone wrong anymore. I was doing it for myself. One of the most rewarding parts of this journey was seeing the impact I could have on others. I had created the Margaret's Legacy Foundation in honor of my grandmother, who had always believed in me when no one else did. The foundation supported young women who wanted to pursue their passions in the arts, providing them with scholarships, mentorship, and the resources they needed to succeed. It felt right to give back, to create something that would help others find their own voice, just as I had found mine. But the true test of my transformation came when I received an invitation to an event that I never thought I would be part of: the prestigious Gala of Excellence, an event where the top entrepreneurs and philanthropists gathered. I had been invited as a guest of honor, a woman who had overcome adversity and achieved remarkable success in her industry. I wasn't sure what to expect as I walked into the grand ballroom, surrounded by people who had spent years building their empires. I had never been someone who sought the spotlight, but tonight felt different. I wasn't just attending this event as a guest. I was attending as someone who had fought for her place at the table, someone who had carved out her own path. As I walked across the room, I felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. I had earned my spot here, but the memories of being rejected, of being told I wasn't enough, still lingered in my mind. But as I looked around at the people there, I realized something powerful. None of these people had arrived at success without their own struggles, their own challenges. We all had our stories. We all had our battles. And tonight, it was my turn to share mine. As the evening progressed, I found myself surrounded by people who genuinely wanted to hear about my journey. The ups and downs, the moments of doubt, the moments of triumph. I spoke about the challenges of building my business, but I also spoke about the importance of forgiveness, of healing, and of learning to believe in myself, even when no one else did. And then, unexpectedly, my parents showed up. I hadn't invited them. In fact, I hadn't even mentioned the gala to them. But there they were, standing across the room looking out of place among the polished guests. My father, dressed in a suit that looked too stiff for him, caught my eye. He smiled at me, and for the first time in a long while, I saw pride in his eyes. It was the same look I had longed for throughout my childhood, the look I had worked so hard to earn. But now, it wasn't about their approval. It was about me knowing my worth. I walked over to them, my heart pounding in my chest, but this time there was no anger, no resentment. Just a quiet, steady understanding of where we all stood. "Mom, Dad," I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "I'm glad you came." My mother looked at me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "We're proud of you, Kira, more than you know." "I know," I said softly. "And I'm proud of both of you, too." We stood there in silence for a moment, surrounded by the bustle of the gala, but in that moment, it felt like time had stopped. I had come full circle, from the girl who had been thrown out with nothing but a suitcase to the woman standing before her parents, proud and at peace with who she had become. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversation, laughter, and celebration. But as I stood on the stage to accept my award, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Not for the money or the accolades or the business success, but for the journey, the hard lessons, and the people who had stood by me, including my family. They had been part of my story, and now they were part of my future. As I spoke into the microphone, I shared my story with the audience, about the challenges, the struggles, and the unexpected twist of fate that had changed everything. I talked about the importance of following your heart, of never giving up, and of always believing in yourself, even when it felt like the world was against you. And as I finished my speech, I looked out into the crowd, my heart full, and realized that everything I had gone through, the pain, the rejection, the uncertainty, had led me to this moment. A moment where I was finally standing in my truth, no longer defined by others' expectations, but by my own. The true victory, I realized, was not in the success I had achieved, but in the woman I had become along the way. And that in itself was worth more than any prize or recognition. It was the Super Bowl, the one game every football fan waits for. The crowd in the stadium roared, the air buzzing with excitement, and there I was, sitting in the VIP suite, one of the most coveted spots in the house. The San Francisco 49ers were making an incredible comeback, and I couldn't help but feel the energy around me. The taste of victory seemed just within reach for them, and for me, it was supposed to be a night of pure celebration. I had earned this moment, earned every second of it. But then my phone buzzed. I glanced down at the screen, half expecting it to be a family message or a friend texting about the game. But it wasn't. "Jessica, you're fired. I want you out by Monday. We want younger faces, nothing personal." It took a second to process. My eyes lingered on the words. This wasn't a joke, and it definitely wasn't some strange spam message. This was my boss, Jordan Fox, the CEO of Gilman Enterprises, texting me while I sat in the VIP section of the stadium during the Super Bowl. It was the kind of moment you couldn't script, the kind of betrayal that felt unreal. Jordan had always been ruthless, but to fire me like this, over a text? The audacity. Nothing personal, he said, as if that would make it better, as if it would make it easier to digest. I wanted to throw my phone across the room. I should have. Instead, I just sat there, frozen, looking at the message again and again, trying to convince myself that this was some kind of mistake. But I knew it wasn't. I had worked at Gilman Enterprises for the past 8 years, helping the company grow, building relationships with high-profile clients, and putting in countless hours. I had dedicated my life to this place. And now, in one text message, it was all gone. I couldn't help but notice the man sitting next to me in the suite. He was older, maybe mid-50s, wearing a perfectly tailored suit and an air of calm that only someone used to high-stakes situations could have. He was watching the game intently, but I could tell his attention was subtly shifting to me. I'd seen that look before. People who noticed everything, who could read body language better than most. It was then that I recognized him. Gerald Knight, Chief Executive Officer of Titan Innovations, the one company Gilman had been trying to outpace for years. We had crossed paths before, but only briefly, at conferences and business events. He had always been polite, professional, but distant. He had always seemed like a quiet competitor, someone who didn't make a lot of noise but got things done. And yet, here he was, sitting next to me at the Super Bowl, and I couldn't help but feel a wave of recognition wash over me. Everything about the moment felt off. I slipped my phone into my pocket, trying to maintain some composure. But my heart was racing, my stomach in knots. I had just been fired, humiliated in front of a man who could very well be the next one to steal everything I had worked for. "Everything okay?" Gerald asked, his voice calm but laced with curiosity. His accent was distinctly British, and it only added to the feeling that something was about to shift. I turned to look at him, forcing a smile, but the weight of the situation felt too heavy to pretend. "Yeah, just work stuff," I said, trying to brush it off. But I knew he could tell something was wrong. His gaze never wavered from mine. He was studying me. I could feel the tension growing, a quiet undercurrent of something that was building. His interest in me wasn't just casual. He knew who I was. He knew what I did. And he knew that something had just happened that could change the course of my career. I leaned back in my seat, staring at the game. But in my mind, all I could see were the words from Jordan's text. I tried to steady myself, but everything inside of me was screaming. He didn't even give me a phone call. No meeting. Just a text. "You know," Gerald said slowly, "if you're willing to discuss business, I think we might be able to work something out." His eyes met mine, and there was something about his tone that made my heart race in a completely different way. This wasn't just small talk. This wasn't just a friendly gesture. There was an opportunity here. An opportunity I hadn't expected. It hit me. I had been with Gilman Enterprises for 8 years, but Gerald Knight was sitting right next to me, offering me something. Something that, just moments ago, I would have never even considered. I smiled, a little tighter than I wanted. "I think I'd be very interested in hearing what you have to say." This wasn't just about the text from Jordan anymore. It wasn't just about the betrayal. It was about something bigger, something far more significant. I wasn't about to let my career slip away. Not just like that. Not over a text. And Jordan had no idea what was coming next. The game raged on, but I couldn't focus on the field anymore. My mind was swirling, the text from Jordan still fresh on my screen, and now Gerald Knight's words echoing in my head. "I think we might be able to work something out." The words had been simple, but the weight they carried was anything but. This wasn't just a casual comment. There was an offer here, an opportunity for something bigger, something that could change everything. I shifted in my seat, trying to regain some semblance of composure. I glanced at Gerald again. He hadn't taken his eyes off the game, but I could tell he was waiting for me to say something, to take the next step. "Would you mind if we talked a bit more?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Gerald turned to me, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips, as if he'd been expecting me to ask this very question. "Not at all," he said, his voice smooth, confident. "I'm here to listen." The next few minutes felt like a blur as I steered the conversation toward business. I tried to keep my tone casual, but every word I spoke carried a sense of urgency. Jordan's text had left me shaken, but now I was driven by something else. The possibility of something greater, something that I hadn't even considered before. Gerald listened attentively, occasionally nodding, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. I spoke about my career at Gilman Enterprises, what I had built, the contracts I had secured, the relationships I had fostered across the country. I talked about the changes I had seen over the years, the rise of younger, more aggressive players in the market, and the way the company had shifted under Jordan's leadership. But I didn't mention the betrayal yet. I didn't mention how the firing had felt like a slap in the face. When I finished, Gerald didn't speak immediately. He seemed to be contemplating something, weighing the options. I waited, knowing that whatever he said next could change everything. "You've been with Gilman Enterprises for a long time," he said finally, his voice thoughtful. "But it sounds like they've been taking you for granted, Jessica. From what I've heard, your talent, your ability to secure clients, is what's been keeping them ahead. But now..." He let the words hang in the air. "Now, I have a chance to offer you something different." I held my breath. This was it. The moment of truth. "I'm looking for someone who can take charge of our expansion into the American market," he continued. "I've heard about your relationships with some of the top players in the industry, and frankly, I think we could use someone like you on our team. You wouldn't be just another executive. You'd be in charge of something big, a major piece of our growth strategy." My heart skipped a beat. This was more than just a job offer. This was an invitation to something much bigger. "And what's the offer?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral, though inside I was already envisioning what this could mean. Gerald smiled slightly. "A seat at the table, a leadership role in our American operations. You'll be given full autonomy to build out the business here. We'll offer you an attractive salary and an equity stake in the company. In addition, I'm prepared to offer you more than just a title. I want you to have real influence, real control over the direction we take in this market." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The opportunity before me was enormous, far more than I had ever expected. It felt surreal, almost too good to be true. But the way he spoke, with such confidence and certainty, made it clear that he was serious. I nodded slowly, my mind racing. "And what's the catch?" I asked, trying to regain some semblance of composure. Gerald's smile didn't fade. "No catch. Just hard work. We're building something special at Titan Innovations, and I believe you could be an integral part of that. But the question is, are you ready to make the leap?" It wasn't just a question about the job. It was a question about me, about my future, my career, and what I wanted out of life. I didn't hesitate. "I'm ready," I said, my voice firm. "I want to be part of something bigger, something that values experience and relationships over just the next shiny face." Gerald's eyes lit up, and for the first time that evening, I felt a sense of relief, as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The fire I had been holding back was finally starting to burn. "Good," he said, standing up and offering me his hand. "Let's make it happen." As we shook hands, I couldn't help but think about Jordan, about how his text had been the catalyst for something far bigger than I could have imagined. I had been fired, but in that moment, sitting next to the CEO of my biggest competitor, I realized that it was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. The game may have been over for the 49ers, but for me, it was just beginning. The following week felt like a whirlwind. What had started as a shocking text from Jordan Fox had rapidly morphed into something far more significant. As I sat in my office at Gilman Enterprises one last time, clearing out my desk, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. I had no idea that a week ago, sitting courtside at the Super Bowl, I would be in this position. But now, with the offer from Titan Innovations on the table, the future seemed full of possibilities. Jordan hadn't even reached out since the text. Not that I expected an apology or explanation. He was too busy trying to salvage what was left of his crumbling empire. I had already learned from Patricia, a colleague in HR, that the company was struggling to keep clients happy, especially after my departure. It was a small but satisfying piece of information, knowing that I hadn't been the only one whose departure had shaken things up. But now, my focus was entirely on the opportunity ahead of me. I had spent hours on the phone with Gerard Knight, discussing the finer details of my role at Titan Innovations. The more we talked, the more I realized that this wasn't just a job offer. It was a chance to take everything I had learned over the past decade and put it to use in a company that appreciated my experience and relationships. I had already made the decision. Titan Innovations was where I belonged now. The day I officially handed in my resignation was nerve-wracking, but not for the reasons I had expected. I had prepared myself for the confrontation with Jordan, for the uncomfortable moment when I would have to face him. But to my surprise, when I walked into his office, he barely looked up from his computer. "Jessica," he muttered without even glancing in my direction. "I see you've made up your mind." I didn't respond at first. I simply handed him the resignation letter I had drafted earlier that morning. He didn't ask me why. He didn't argue or try to convince me to stay. Instead, he nodded absently, still focused on the screen in front of him. "Thanks for your time," he said flatly. "I'll have HR process your exit. Good luck." Good luck. The words hit me harder than I expected. After everything I had done for this company, all the sacrifices, the long nights, the travel, the relationships I had built, it all came down to a simple, dismissive, "Good luck." I didn't say a word as I left his office. The reality of what had just happened settled in. This was the final step in my departure from Gilman Enterprises. But as I walked out of the building for the last time, I couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement. I was free. And I was moving on to something far better. A few days later, I sat across from Gerard Knight in his sleek London office. We had finalized the details of my contract, and now it was time to discuss the next steps. "Are you ready to hit the ground running?" Gerard asked, leaning back in his chair with a smile. His eyes gleamed with confidence, and I could see why Titan Innovations had become a force in the industry. He was a man who knew what he wanted and how to get it. "Absolutely," I said, feeling a wave of anticipation. "I've been preparing for this moment for years." Gerard nodded, clearly impressed. "I know you have. That's why I'm bringing you in to oversee our American expansion. We've had our eyes on this market for some time now, and with you on board, I'm confident we can take the lead." I smiled. It wasn't arrogance, it was the confidence that came from knowing you had the tools to succeed. This wasn't just about stepping into a new job. This was about proving to myself and to everyone else that I could build something even greater than what I had left behind at Gilman. We spent the next hour discussing strategy, how we would position Titan Innovations in the American market, the key players we needed to connect with, and the roadmap for expansion. I was surprised by how much autonomy Gerard was willing to give me from the start. This wasn't just a job. This was a chance to create something from the ground up. As I left the meeting, I felt a fire inside me that I hadn't felt in years. This was it. This was my opportunity to show the world what I was truly capable of. And more importantly, this was my chance to prove to myself that my career didn't have to be defined by a company that saw me as disposable. That night, as I sat in my hotel room, I reflected on everything that had led me to this point. I thought about the years I had spent at Gilman Enterprises, the relationships I had built, the clients I had secured. And then I thought about the betrayal, the cold text that had set everything in motion. In the past, I would have let that kind of injustice consume me. But now, I felt nothing but gratitude. Jordan had underestimated me. He had thought that firing me would be the end of my career. What he didn't know was that he had set me free. I had a new mission now, one that had nothing to do with proving him wrong, but everything to do with proving to myself that I could achieve something greater than I ever imagined. I wasn't just going to survive. I was going to thrive. And as the night sky stretched out over London, I knew that my journey was only just beginning. Titan Innovations had given me the opportunity to reinvent myself, and I wasn't going to waste it. The weeks following my decision to join Titan Innovations were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and preparations. I immersed myself in the process of establishing Titan's presence in the American market, but even amidst all the new projects and opportunities, the shadow of my departure from Gilman still lingered. Every time I spoke to a potential client or met with the internal team at Titan, I couldn't shake the nagging thought that Jordan Fox was out there, somewhere, trying to salvage what was left of the European division I had helped build. But it was more than just that. It was the realization that I wasn't just a casualty of a failed corporate relationship. I was part of a bigger narrative, one where corporate politics, egos, and misguided power plays often decided who succeeded and who didn't. As I sat in the sleek, modern conference room at Titan's London headquarters, I couldn't help but feel a surge of power I hadn't expected. I had walked away from Gilman Enterprises, yes, but now I was in control. I was the one who would decide how this next chapter of my career would unfold. And the more I spoke with clients, the more I realized just how many of them trusted me. They knew my name. They remembered the work I had done. And now they wanted me back. One particular meeting stands out. I had been in talks with Klaus Baer, a major player in the tech industry, for years. At Gilman, I had worked tirelessly to secure a deal with his company. But as was always the case with Jordan, the success had been overshadowed by his insistence on taking credit for everything. When I reached out to Klaus again, this time under the banner of Titan Innovations, I expected a level of resistance. After all, I was no longer part of the company that had helped his business grow. What I didn't expect was the warmth in Klaus's voice when I called him. "Jessica," he said, "it's been too long. I heard about your departure from Gilman. You know, you were always the reason I kept working with them. Let's talk." I sat back, stunned. I had always known that the relationships I had cultivated with clients weren't just transactional. They were built on trust, on mutual respect, and on years of hard work. But to hear Klaus, one of the biggest names in the industry, speak so candidly about my value was humbling. After our conversation, I felt like I had just crossed a line. I wasn't just moving forward with my career at Titan. I was bringing along the relationships I had forged, the work I had done. And suddenly, the offer from Titan seemed like the perfect fit. This was not just an opportunity to rebuild. It was a chance to make an even bigger impact. But not everyone was as enthusiastic about my transition. As I settled into my new role, Jordan's shadow continued to follow me. I had left him behind, but he hadn't left me. Every client I spoke to, every business deal I began to initiate, I could feel his presence in the background. There was no denying it. He was trying to undermine me. A few days after Klaus confirmed his interest in moving forward with Titan, I received an email from one of my former colleagues at Gilman. It was short and to the point. "Jordan is making moves behind the scenes. He's trying to convince clients that you're unstable. He's even called a few of them personally to say you're no longer with the company and that your departure was mutual." It was like a punch to the gut. Jordan had been playing the game all along, trying to ensure that my departure would reflect poorly on me. But he didn't know one crucial thing. I wasn't done yet. What he didn't understand was that every move he made only made my position stronger. As I sat at my desk at Titan, reviewing contracts and preparing proposals, I realized how much I had underestimated myself. I had thought my worth was tied to one company, one brand. But now, as I looked at the opportunities unfolding before me, I saw the truth. My relationships, my experience, my understanding of the market. Those things were invaluable. And it was clear to me now. I wasn't just competing with Jordan. I was playing a bigger game. One where I could outmaneuver him at every turn. The following weeks were filled with strategic calls and meetings with Titan's top executives. They were all excited about the clients I was bringing with me, and the momentum was building. Every time I picked up the phone, there was a sense of urgency and possibility that hadn't been there before. With each new client, my confidence grew, and with it, the distance between my past at Gilman and my present at Titan. But even as I reveled in the success, Jordan was still lurking. I had received more updates from Patricia. Word around the office was that Gilman was desperately trying to hold on to its clients. They were offering deep discounts, promising better services, and even starting to restructure entire divisions. They had no idea what they were up against. I smiled to myself. I had known exactly what I was doing when I left. I had been fired, but Jordan's plan to get rid of me had backfired in ways he couldn't have possibly predicted. What he thought was a simple firing had turned into an opportunity for me to take control of my future, and it was one I wasn't going to let slip away. A week later, as I reviewed my strategy for Titan's US expansion, I felt a shift. The momentum was building, and I could feel the power of my position growing with every call I made. Jordan had underestimated me, and now I was about to show him just how wrong he was. This was my time, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about proving that loyalty, hard work, and integrity always paid off in the end. And Jordan Fox was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The phone call came late one evening, just as I was wrapping up a meeting with a potential client in New York. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something told me it was important. I hesitated for only a moment before answering. "Jessica, it's Patricia," came the voice on the other end. "I've just heard from some of the people at Gilman. You won't believe this." I leaned forward, instinctively bracing myself. "They're panicking." Patricia continued, her voice low. "I've been getting updates all day. It seems like word is spreading fast about your new role at Titan. Your clients are backing you, but there's more." I was quiet, waiting for her to continue. "Riley's not just losing clients. He's losing control. They're trying to save face by throwing you under the bus, saying you were the one who abandoned them first. They're doing everything they can to push the blame onto you." I sighed. I had expected this. Jordan and his team were desperate, looking for anyone to blame for their growing mess. But it wasn't going to work. "Did they really think I was going to just fade into the background?" I said, shaking my head. "I built those relationships. They didn't understand how deep my ties were to the clients they now think they can replace me with." "I think they're about to find out the hard way," Patricia said. "Word on the street is that Riley is getting pressure from the board. The German firm he's been negotiating with for the European division is pulling out, fast. They've just lost 2 of their biggest contracts." The news hit me like a punch to the gut, but I knew I had already played my part. The cards were falling in place, and Riley had no idea what was coming next. I took a deep breath. "It's only a matter of time before they realize what happened. How fast can we move on this?" Patricia hesitated, then replied, "I've already got the lawyers looking into it." The next few days are crucial. If we make a move now, they won't be able to recover from this. The next morning, I woke up early, my mind buzzing with plans. Titan Innovations was growing faster than I had imagined, and the clients I had brought in were thrilled with the direction we were headed. But as much as I was enjoying the progress, there was something deeply satisfying about the way everything was unfolding. I had never expected Jordan to collapse so quickly. But then again, his arrogance had always been his downfall. I spent the day on calls, discussing final contract details with the new clients while simultaneously preparing for the next phase of my strategy. I had to be patient. Timing was everything now. I couldn't rush the process. I had to let the foundation of trust I had built over the years work for me. Then, just as I was finishing up the final touches on an expansion plan, I received another call, this time from Gerard. "Jessica, I need you to listen carefully," he said, his voice serious. "I've just received a very interesting phone call. Riley Fox is in full damage control mode. He's calling people left and right, trying to keep them from jumping ship. But there's something more. He's trying to do damage to your reputation, saying you sabotaged the European division on your way out. I gripped the phone tighter, a surge of anger rising in my chest. I'd known this was coming, but hearing it straight from Gerard made it feel real. They've already filed paperwork with the board accusing you of breach of contract, Gerard continued. But here's where things get interesting. I've just seen the paperwork. They've been backdating things, and we've got a case to expose their lies. I felt a sense of calm wash over me, the tension from the past few days suddenly lifting. This was it. This was my moment to not only expose their lies, but to finish what they had started. I've already spoken with the lawyers. We're ready to file, Gerard said. This is your chance to take everything back, but it has to happen quickly. We're going to hit them with everything we've got. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Let's do it. The following Monday morning, I walked into Titan's office with a clear sense of purpose. The last few weeks had been a blur of calls, meetings, and strategy sessions, but now everything felt like it was coming to a head. My clients were all on board, and Titan was positioning itself for rapid growth. But there was one final piece of the puzzle that needed to fall into place. Gerard and I had worked out a plan to expose the false claims Riley had made about me, and we were ready to present it to the board of directors. We had proof of the backdated documents, the lies he had spread, and the deals he had tried to make behind the scenes to cover his own tracks. As I walked into the meeting with Gerard by my side, I couldn't help but feel a small smile tug at the corners of my mouth. This was it. I had taken everything I had learned, every lesson from the past, and turned it into something more powerful than I ever thought possible. The room fell silent as I stood before the board. Riley was sitting at the far end of the table, his face flushed with anger. He knew exactly what was coming, and this time I wasn't going to back down. Thank you for your time, I began, my voice steady. I'm here to show you the truth. And the truth is, your leadership has been built on lies. I watched as the board members shifted in their seats, glancing nervously at each other. Riley's eyes darted between us, and I could see the panic creeping into his expression. I had done it. I had taken everything back. I had shown them that I was more than just an employee to be discarded. I was a force to be reckoned with. By the time the meeting ended, Riley was being escorted out of the building. The board had voted to remove him from his position, and in his place, Gerard Knight would be stepping in as the new CEO. The company was finally in the right hands. As I left the boardroom, I felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. The game had changed, and I was the one who had rewritten the rules. And in the end, it wasn't just about taking down Jordan Fox. It was about proving to myself that no matter how many obstacles they put in my way, I would always find a way to rise above them.